All right. Welcome back to Black Bear News, where everything is connected. How are you all doing? We are live on Callin, Rockfin, and on YouTube. Good to see you all here. Rockfin people, how you doing? Plastic bottle plant aflame in Florida. Thanks. Thanks, Denver. The hits just keep on coming, right? Massive 5-acre fire breaks out at Florida warehouse. Emergency personnel are responding to a warehouse fire that started Thursday in Kissimmee, Florida. 5 acres of plastic planters caught fire at a nursery supply company. Wow. All right. Y'all want to see some, I guess we'll see some smoke plumes from this. Well, that's not good. Oh, I guess it's train derailment month and toxic hazardous waste. Oh, Jesus. Hazardous waste month. Sorry, I'm just really fumbling the beginning of the show. It's a little overwhelming, though, don't you think? Slightly overwhelming. But it feels like things are kind of falling apart a little bit. And there's multiple reasons for that, I think. It's crazy. We just keep on destroying the things, don't we? That's what we do. Another hazmat train just derailed in Detroit. Obsolete optics. Jeez. That is depressing. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole slew of coverage going on. Somebody did send me I think it was Jay Brandt sent me an article. The reporter that was arrested in East Palestine is now free, or they have dropped the charges, so that's good. We're just falling apart because there are no controls anymore. Also, apparently the safety controls that were proposed for the train that crashed in East Palestine were rolled back or overturned or blocked by Trump at the urging of this or that lobbyist, train operators. Deregulate. And then so that's what they got was the result of that. It doesn't really matter, though, whether it's Trump or Biden or Obama or Bush. They kind of all do the same thing. Little by little, they hack away at what little protections we have left. And, I apologize if I take. If it seems like I'm sniping at other alternative journalists, you know, I appreciate any and all truth telling and alternative journalism, of course. I'm just pointing out the inconsistencies of the message, that's all. Where you can see some inconsistencies in the message. Right. Denver says Biden and company broke the strike when workers went on strike for better safety standards. So there you go. Right. They're going to try and blame it on Trump. But it was a team effort, right? It was Team Uniparty who did it. Right. Trump blocked the ruling, and railroad workers struck for better conditions, safety conditions, and then Biden said, nah. D-Truth, that is absolutely hilarious and unacceptable. That's funny. Yeah. I mean, we just live in a situation where things are. But the Banana Republic has just kind of pulled back the curtains. And there's been, there's a long list of, there's a track record. Leading up to this incident, right? So it's not a thing that just happened and like, there was a history, a confluence, if you will, of events that took place that enabled this to happen. And then there was, strangely, a Netflix movie that was located in the same area about exactly the same thing, an airborne toxic event of a train derailment. It's weird, it's very weird. All of it is very weird. Extra Bulla says, maybe I'm crazy, and I may be, but it seems like the establishment and their political puppets are driving us to get out in the streets, yet we don't. It's stunning. And do you think, I mean, yeah, right? You think people would be a little upset by now with the events that went on over the last, 2 or 3 years. You think people would be have had it up to here, and yet we don't get out in the streets. But if they're driving us to get out in the streets, for what, to what end? In order to clamp down, in order to enact martial law? I don't know. One of the most kind of mind-boggling and interesting things that happened during the pandemic was the whole George Floyd protest thing. I mean, if you actually think about it in context, that was really wild, right? Everybody was supposed to be locked down in the middle of a pandemic, scared, frightened in their homes, and yet this huge protest broke out. Massive protest broke out. And it was pretty major. So I don't know that there's any reason why that couldn't happen. But what's the catalyst? Can people just be motivated by the fact that things are just bad all over? You know, this is. I mean, we're falling apart. Countries falling apart. People are falling apart financially. Are you know? They're not telling us the truth about what's going on. Really, you know, the real financial state of the union. They're sending all this, you know, billions of dollars to Ukraine, over $100 billion already, and you know, and yet nobody seems to find any of this. You know, not nobody. There are people out there, but you know, there's not a massive movement of people to go, we've had enough. I mean, I'm going to take this call from Lance, but they have truly, I mean, they've truly captured, you know, not only is the government is captured by oligarchs, but the government has captured a lot of people's minds. Yeah, I thought so too, Extra Bolo. I thought, oh, here we go. This is going to be great. Police started attacking protesters and it went away. Well, that'll do, yeah, right? Nobody wants to be clubbed in the streets. But they've really captured people's minds, you know. They've really got people in a position, in a place where, you know, nobody knows who to band together with to mount a protest. You know, nobody really knows what's going on. It's very hard to tell, you know, have a clear picture of what is really happening, or who to protest with and what to protest against and where to do it. Meanwhile, they keep passing laws making it harder and harder to protest, criminalizing protests, all kinds of protests. Hey, Lance, how you doing?
Good, man. How's it going?
It's going all right.
Yeah, there's so many ways to analyze this, you know. So just to start somewhere, just to jump in, one thing that happened in the '60s, going all the way back to the early '60s, you know, the free speech movement at Berkeley. That was just about general free speech. It wasn't anti-war. It was early '60s. And it's funny when you watch movies from the late '50s and early '60s. There's signs of, you know, students doing protests. I mean, going back to the late '40s, early '50s, right after the war, especially after the Korean War. All right. So what's different now is, as say in Mao's Little Red Book. In 10th grade, we got to hold of Mao's Little Red Book. Stuff about, you know, spikes in a hole with you know, shrubs over it to get people on the you know, and over the trail, all that kind of stuff. But he also talked about revolution, and we were rebels without a cause, making pipe bombs for no apparent reason. There's no politics involved. Even though I was reading a lot of political stuff, I was developing my own politics. But anyway, right? Here's what he said: revolutions can start with academia. Like I think the first Russian Revolution, it could be the aristocrats, the American Revolution. That was the rich that didn't want taxation without representation. We weren't poor. We were living better than most colonial people that were living in colonial, you know, with a boot on them than most other people. Okay. So that was the American Revolution, was aristocrats. You have the workers' revolts. You even have occasionally, like in Haiti, you know, a slave revolt. So it could start, you know, with lots of different places where you might see this happen. Yeah. But eventually, this is what Mao pointed to, eventually the elites have to embrace it, right? Like we always talk about, the 10%. Not the 1%. Of course, it's the 10% managerial class that has to do the bidding of the 1% and lord over the one below them and all that. Okay, we know all that. But here's what's different. We have to fight the 10%. They're not going to get on board, because I grew up in first-generation suburbia. And let me tell you, when it was white flight, because if you have two families, they'll allow one in a certain area, red zone, literally. If you have two black families or people of, nope, goodbye. So it was like that. So white flight was not just racist people. It was like they couldn't do a house. It was literally, I got to have a house. I have a job. I'm moving up the ladder of, you know, success here, you know, and the American dream. If I can't own a house and get insurance, no fault of my own. Now, there was also racist people. The point, and also, I went to school with the richest kids in the city, the nicest neighborhood. None of those kids in this generation, they all went to private school. None of them go to the school I went to. So we're so separated. We have people whose grandparents were from suburbia. And I know I've lived in suburbia. I've lived in hellhole, crack-infested, 90% people of color, 10% white. I've lived in upper middle class suburbia. I live now in the country. I've been around, if you will. And so I'm telling you that suburban mentality is the worst. That's what people always tell you. It's not like the people are evil. It's just what you have to do to live in that 10%. But we're not going to get them on board. They'll put another sign, another letter on the LGBTQ. They'll add another marginalized group to their sign and go drink Chardonnay and say vote for Biden. It's just sad being someone from the 60s who saw all kinds of liberal action from JFK to LBJ to civil rights legislation, all that great stuff. And we still, not me, I was too young, I was a kid, but we still stormed the Democratic National Convention saying, no, not enough, no more war. This is a 2-year, they didn't even implement all the great, wonderful social programs. Can you imagine today? Oh no, we got to be nice to LBJ. He just signed all this wonderful legislation. Even on the left, even people that I adore, people that I respect, their Overton window, oh no, we can't have this. They're actually engaging in such a narrow argument. I'm talking about a lot of folks on the left. Like I said, even people I like. And they take these arguments that we have to be the incrementalists as if they're not complete children. They argue with them as if they have a good faith argument. And we got to get a lot more radical in our speech, and we got to start storming the capitals of our country. I think you're right. There's nothing left besides just storming the gates. And let me just quote Chris Hedges. Revolutions don't end with bloody civil wars. They end when 500,000 people surround the Capitol for 2 weeks straight. They get the message quick because they know. Show the numbers. Just show them the numbers. Just like us, just like we people. They put up a big stick over us and censor us, and we say, oh, I guess we do it because we're not realizing that they don't have such a big stick as we think. The converse is also true. They see 500,000 people surrounding the state or federal Capitol every day for 2 weeks. They'll change quick. Then listen from people who are a lot smarter than me.
And I imagine that it wouldn't even take that much. I mean, right now, like, social media is literally like a focus group for the people in control, right? Like they tried to fly that like UFO stuff last weekend, and I actually think that was a test. That was just like they were just putting it, out there just to see how people responded, right? To see how far they could go with it. And I think they saw that people were like, yeah, I don't think so, right? And so they scuttled that whole thing really quickly, right? It just went away as quickly as it came. It was just a focus group. It was like and they do that. They put things out there to see how willing people are to take up this, whatever it is. And people are less and less willing to take up, these news stories as serious or real anymore. And they know that, they know the difference between real and fake is that, when the media doesn't cover it, that means that's a real story. When the media does cover it, that means that's a fake story, right? Like, so, that's one way. That's one way to make your voice heard. I think is just be part of the I don't know what you want to call it, the larger voice, the larger community, just, getting really vocal about what you see going on. But that's not going to be enough. Like I think if people really got out there and really started, getting some numbers out in the streets, like, they'll strike back. Yes, they will come back, but they will also go, oh, wow, it took a lot for these people to get out here. Like,
Yeah, I think general strikes, massive general strikes. So it's got to be a lot of people. So there's got to be more of us so that when they crack down like on the Atlantic City cop thing, the rest of us don't know what's going on. But if it's in every country at once, the problem is, okay, there's no strategy in organizing. Listen to Kshama Sawant. There's none. There is no left. There is no focal point. No. And it doesn't have to be a leader. It's not about leaders. Of course, it's not about leaders. Martin Luther King knew that.
But it helps. It helps.
I can only be a catalyst. But he knew it's going to have to be the masses. So even when you start with leaders, it's got to get to the masses. And it can be leaderless, but it can only be leaderless if, for instance, this is my great argument about immigration. Hey, let's be honest here, folks. We were a little bit complacent after World War I. It was immigrants that were rowdy and they were angry and they were poor and they had been in Europe and they were exposed to Marxist socialism and we weren't in America. So it was rowdy, disruptive, anarchic. Yes, they created fictional charges like the Haymarket thing when the people weren't even there. Of course they did. But there was real people throwing real rocks. It wasn't all peaceful. They were destroying shit, and it was people from other countries, in other words, that were radicalized. So they weren't going to be kowtowed because they came from a place that it was so bad. They're like, I didn't come to America and then be treated like I was in my other country. Where am I going to go now?
Right.
So they fought. They fought in the place they were.
Well,
there wasn't anywhere for them to go after being refugees from Eastern Europe. And people from Italy, not my family, but from Italy and Eastern Europe, that's where a lot of these radicals, that's why they have names like Koshayumsky and Yashki. They were from Russia. They were from, Eastern Europe, a lot of them, and
right.
we don't have that now. There is no infrastructure for that. So that's going to make it hard. But the workers, here's the thing, right? If you take slaves, actual slaves, and the indigenous people who were slaughtered, there's no more powerless group, I would say, since the end of Reconstruction, when it started really good. Black senators in Washington, congressmen, they ran city. Okay, they ended Reconstruction. So Jim Crow from the end of Reconstruction to the 60s, 50s, those are the most powerless people, in my view, in the country. Montgomery bus boycott, it took 18 months, but they won. The most powerless people outside of actual slaves are indigenous people. The most powerless people that had alleged rights at all, but none really, the most powerless people in our history turned around the Montgomery, Deep South, completely racist, white supremacist state, and they won the fight after 18 months with no intervention, with no civil thing. And also apartheid was ended by national, usually young kids at colleges, forcing their university and forcing corporations to boycott, disinvest, and sanction. And even though Reagan would not sanction South Africa, apartheid ended. So, and the Vietnam War was people in the streets, and it was only 50-50. The polls, pro or against war, it was 50-50, even in 1968. So it's definitely the squeaky wheels can if we get out and map. But anyway, I'll stop with that.
Sure. Well, thanks, man. Thanks for calling in. I appreciate you. I got to move on to some other stories, but I appreciate your call. All of those are really great points. Really great points. True story. There used to be more organizing around protesting things that are bad. Okay, if I can say it so stupidly. All right. Well, shoot. We're already at 12:30, but let's look at a couple of stories. I want to read a article. Creative Experiment says economic collapse next month. Nobody can stop it. Okay. I mean, I keep hearing about the impending economic collapse. We'll see. Poppy, didn't see this one coming. Cacti invading the Alps. Good Lord. Okay, so. And we know the planet is changing, the climate is changing, and for some reason I can't see this article for whatever reason. Hold on. Oh, maybe that's why. Why can't I see this? It's ridiculous. But we know that, oh God. We know that climates are changing, right? And here we go. Here, maybe this is it. Swiss Alps, which featured beautiful snowscapes, were covered in green. British Guardian reported on the 10th that the Swiss landscape is changing due to global warming. Residents of the Valais canton in southern Switzerland are used to seeing slopes covered in snow in the winter and Edelweiss flowers in summer. However, as global warming intensifies, more and more cacti are growing. According to the report, cactus species belonging to the fan cactus family are currently proliferating throughout Valais. Cactus propagation has also been reported in Sion, the capital of Valais. The media reported that cacti make up 23 to 30% of the area's vegetation. Wow. Biologist Jan Tripones said that this cactus species is an invasive species. Recent climate change has led to warmer weather in the Alps. That's true because the things are melting. The snow is melting. And has reduced the amount of snow cover, which has created ideal conditions for cactus growth. Species can withstand 10 to 15 degrees below zero without any problems. The cactus likes dry weather and hates snow. All right, well, that's interesting, if not frightening. But we know that, things are moving. Hospitable climates for different plants are shifting, creating a different world. Another one from Poppy, krill biomass is going down more than any other wild animal. 300 to 500 million metric tons. That's krill biomass, more than any other wild animal, but not limitless, under huge pressure from overfishing, pollution, warming oceans, loss of ice, and acidification. Overfishing threatens once endless Antarctic krill. Krill fishing has increased year over year as demand rises for the tiny crustaceans, which are used as feed additives for global aquaculture and processed for krill oil. Oh, yeah. We need that krill. Put that krill on the grill. Sorry. Antarctic krill play a critical role in maintaining the health of our planet by storing carbon and providing food for numerous species. But why don't we just plan on feeding, fishing some more so we could feed some more people? I think that's, because that's pro-human. Pro-human all the time. Warming that is occurring along the Antarctic Peninsula and in Scotia Sea has caused the krill stocks in those areas to shrink, and the center of that population has moved southwards. Tim Bernard, a marine ecologist at Oregon State University, wrote to Manga Bay via email while stationed in the Antarctic Peninsula. This tells us already that krill numbers aren't endless. Look at him, krill. Fishing nations started casting their nets for Antarctic krill in the 1970s, believing these small crustaceans could provide a valuable source of animal protein that would alleviate world hunger. Alleviate world hunger. We've got 8 billion people. The food's got to come from somewhere. And if you got a problem with that, you're anti-human. In the 1980s, interest in krill fishing waned, partly because no one was sure how to remove the high levels of fluoride in their exoskeletons. It was also generally difficult to process krill into food fit for human consumption and to successfully sell these foods to consumers. But krill fishing never really stopped. In fact, it's been gaining momentum. Why wouldn't it? Of course. Ever since krill was identified as suitable animal feed, now krill is mainly used as a feed additive in the global aquaculture industry, as well as to produce krill oil that goes into omega-3 dietary supplements. Hey, your grandma or your grandpa takes omega-3, right? Maybe you take omega-3. Omega-3 is good for you. Where do we get all the omega-3? Well, we overfish all the krill out of the oceans. Enjoy. Or cheers. Anyways. There was concerns over Antarctic krill fishing. CCAMLR was established to address those concerns. In 2010, the CCAMLR established a rule limiting catches to 5.61 million metric tons across 4 subsections of Area 48 where krill fishing was concentrated. The rule also dictated that krill fishing in these areas must stop if the total combined catch reached a trigger level of 620,000 metric tons. So far, total catches have not exceeded this boundary, but krill fishing nations, which currently include Norway, China, South Korea, Ukraine, and Chile, are inching closer to it as they expand their operations. And what about all the fish that need the krill to survive? F them. That's what beautiful and amazing humans do. We F them. F them. Yeah. All right. Another issue with current catch limits is that they don't consider the impacts of climate change, according to Bernard. There's no seasonal closure on the krill fishery, and because of delayed sea ice formation in the region around Gerlach Strait, that's in the Antarctic Peninsula, the fishery can extend into winter. When that happens, the fishery could remove massive numbers from the next reproductive cohort of the population. Not only will global heating deplete the sea ice that krill depend on, but research has suggested that warming waters will impact krill growth, possibly leading to 40% decline in the mass of individual krill by the end of the century. Other research has argued that ocean acidification, another impact of climate change, will reduce krill development and hatchling rate and lead to an eventual collapse in 2300. Well, okay. Do you believe that? Anyways, interesting article. I'm not going to read the whole thing. But the humans and the global warming kind of impact kind of everything. We're going to move to something else. We know that there is... Oh, darn it. No thanks. I'm going to read this article. I'm going to try to read this article. Wishful thinking and other existential threats. Hey, y'all. Hey, y'all. We're live on YouTube. Rockfin Colin. You can support the channel at buymeacoffee.com/Black Bear News or Rockfin Tips. Also kindly accepted. YouTube Tips, also kindly accepted. Venmo and Cash App links are in the description. All right. Jim Bundell posted this yesterday. And we'll see if we can get into this or through most of it. Wishful thinking and other existential threats. A dispute over extreme climate scenarios, from Matt Colborn. For over 75 years now, every January has been marked by a grim festival. That is the Doomsday Clock announcement from the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. The Doomsday Clock, whose time has been set every year since 1947, warns the public about how close humanity is to destroying itself with dangerous technologies of our own making. These dangers include the threat of nuclear war, climate breakdown, pathogens, and disruptive technologies. Since 2020, the clock has been set at 100 seconds to midnight, the closest to doomsday since the clock began. My bet for this year was that the clock would be moved forward. For a start, the Ukraine war had significantly inflated the threat of nuclear war. The environmental review of 2022 had also been, despite one or two hopeful signs, not good. The Guardian had called 2022 another mile on the highway to climate hell. Emissions were also at a record high, so 10 days before the announcement, I was surprised to read a piece in The New Scientist suggesting that we perhaps needn't worry after all. Sounds like a Schellenberger Sounds like a delicious Schillenberger. Okay, Doomer. Headline in the New Scientist: Why worst case scenarios are no longer likely. This headline advertised Graham Lawton's column from 2023. Lawton quotes Roger Pielke Jr., we'll call him Pilk, who claims that the worst case scenarios are no longer even remotely plausible. The justification, Pilk claims, is that the business as usual scenario first discussed in the 2014 IPCC panel report was implausible in the first place. The business as usual scenario is technically known as RCP 8.5. Pilk claims that RCP 8.5 has been illegitimately used in the media and in scientific papers to promote alarmism about climate breakdown. He should have lunch with Michael Mann, I guess. He also says that RCP 8.5 wasn't just a conservative extrapolation of current trends, but a turbocharged one that assumed, for example, that the use of coal would increase fivefold by 2100, with no climate mitigation whatsoever. Lawton and Pilk argued that 4 or 5 Cs of warming by 2100 is no longer plausible and was always unlikely. Pilk goes on to claim that the picture that we paint in terms of science, assessment, policy, and journalism is dominated by the extreme scenario. Jem Bendell notes that RCP 8.5 has been under fire for some time. In 2020, Zeke Hosfather and Glenn Peters also claimed that the scenario had been illegitimately used by the media as a likely business-as-usual outcome. This is from 2020. However, the authors of RCP 8.5 responded to Hosfather and Peters in a letter written to PNAS. They said that what matters for the purpose of providing input to climate models is total atmospheric CO2 content. They also said that there is no evidence that we have reached peak emissions from land use change or peak deforestation. In other words, the credibility of Hosfather and Peters' arguments relies upon optimistic predictions about energy and land use in the coming decades. Optimistic predictions that do not look very likely to be fulfilled. Well, yeah. A wider debate. Critics claim that RCP 8.5 alone has been used to foster the promotion of extreme scenarios, but even without RCP 8.5, there's plenty of independent evidence that extreme climate breakdown scenarios remain a risk. For a start, climate breakdown is hitting us faster than most scientists expected. Ding. Why do we know this? Because you can see it with your eyeballs if they remain open, and may before long exceed our capacity to cope. Kemp et al. 2022 in a paper titled Climate Endgame, Exploring Catastrophic Climate Change Scenarios. I think I read that one. State that even without considering worst-case climate responses, the current trajectory puts the world on track for a temperature rise between 2.1 C and 3.9 C by 2100. Again, some people would call that extremely conservative. And those temperatures would not be good, right? Kemp et al. Source is an analysis of what needs to happen to meet the Paris targets, which also does not use the RCP 8.5 scenario as a basis for its claims. Kemp et al. Also note that the IPCC has yet to give focused attention to catastrophic climate change. So far from overstating the case, the authors of the IPCC have likely understated the dangers that humanity faces later this century. Kemp et al. Conclude that there is ample evidence that climate change could become catastrophic. Ample evidence. We could enter such endgames at even modest levels of warming, right? That's called feedback loops. Where as it becomes a little hotter, things start kicking in that make it a little hotter, and then it becomes a little hotter, and then more things kick in that make it a little hotter. That's called a feedback loop. Understanding extreme risks is important for robust decision making. Yes, because why wouldn't you want to take the worst case scenario very seriously? from preparation to consideration of emergency responses. Roger Pilk, along with Matthew Burgess and another author, wrote in a paper in response to Kemp's. They claim that, on the contrary, IPCC reports overemphasize catastrophic scenarios, as does broader discourse. They offer a counter-analysis claiming that overemphasized apocalyptic futures can be used to support despotism and rashness. Well, we wouldn't want that. Especially I'm allergic to rashes. Oh, they said rashness. Kemp and colleagues responded, disagreeing that catastrophic scenarios are already adequately or excessively studied. They also pointed out that Burgess et al. Had conflated catastrophic climate scenarios with high-end warming scenarios. They stated that high-end warming scenarios are plausible, while high-end anthropogenic emissions appear unlikely. Temperatures consistent with these scenarios could be reached due to stronger than expected Earth system responses or after a longer duration of anthropogenic emissions. What we have here is a conflict of narratives and some disagreement about what the evidence suggests about the future. For non-experts, judging this sort of conflict can be very tricky. One is bombarded with contradictory analysis, interpretations, and even data sets. Ain't that the truth? For clarification about the Lawton piece, I asked Bill McGuire, an emeritus professor of earth sciences at UCL, for his views. McGuire is the author of a number of books, including Hothouse Earth, which I can recommend as a crucial summary of the dangers we face from climate breakdown. His conclusions about the New Scientist piece were not very flattering, and I will quote them in full. McGuire says, I have read this now and feel strongly that it presents a dangerous and irrelevant view. On the basis of current policies, we could be on track for a rise as great as 3.6 C. And this is without really considering the effects of poorly constrained tipping points. Some people think 3.6 C is this no more humans. If the fossil fuel corporations are allowed to burn all identified reserves, this will add 3 trillion tons of CO2 to the atmosphere and likely bring a double figure rise. Double figure meaning over 10. Over 10 C, which is doesn't really matter by then, right? Nothing matters then. Does Lawton really think that a projected 30% fall in global crop yields by 2050, as the planet's population increases by half as much again, means things are not as bad as they appear? 30% fall in global crop yields by 2050. What do you guys think that's going to do to the population of the planet? That sounds kind of anti-human. Means things are not as bad as they appear, and that widespread famine, civil unrest, and society beginning to unravel is no big deal. It looks to me as if Lawton has allowed himself to be seduced by someone who has devoted his career to downplaying global heating and resulting climate breakdown. Them oil companies pay pretty good out here. Got me a job with an oil company. Then there's the question of Lawton's source. Roger A. Pilk Jr. Pilk, who works at the University of Colorado, has for some time been a contrarian voice in the climate debates. For example, in a 2016 article in the Wall Street Journal entitled "My Unhappy Life as a Climate Heretic," he claimed that there is scant evidence to indicate that hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, or drought have become more frequent or intense in the U.S. or globally. Okay. The byline claims that he was attacked by thought police and journalism, activist groups funded by billionaires, and even the White House. His claim about weather is, however, contradicted by attribution studies, which evaluate the connection between extreme weather and climate breakdown. The uses of heresy. The framing of Pilk as a heretic is worth noting. Firstly, being a heretic doesn't necessarily mean that you are right. Just siding with the mainstream science doesn't necessarily mean that you will invariably be wrong. And vice versa. Only a minority of scientific heretics are comparable comparable to Galileo or Darwin, quite a few turn out to be mistaken. It is true that academia can be a tough place for people who depart from the consensus positions of their discipline. The website of the sociologist Brian Martin has a catalog of case studies showing that a number of dissenting academics over the years have faced attacks, censoring, and job loss. Things can be especially tough for scientific dissenters when disputes are politicized. True story. However, Brian Martin, personal communication, blah, blah. Sorry, Brian Martin points out, Brady, I see you. I'll take your call in a moment, okay? Brian points out that in many scientific controversies, such as over pesticides, GMOs, or microwaves, vested interest in scientific orthodoxy align. In that case, the heretic label might be justified. In just two major scientific controversies, scientific orthodoxy clashes with vested interests. Those controversies are over tobacco and climate breakdown. Martin points out that in those cases, a scientist who challenges orthodoxy still has the backing of powerful and wealthy groups so that their position will not be nearly as risky and might be lucrative. In the case of tobacco and climate breakdown, the heretic framing is also, along with arguments about free speech, used as a political weapon. Pilk's case was cited by the Global Warming Policy Foundation as an example of academic persecution. In a report for the foundation, the journalist Donna Laframboise claimed that Pilk had been hounded and that the climate movement rejects clear thinking. It has little interest in sorting facts from fiction, in ensuring its efforts are based on evidence rather than dogma. The movement, claimed Laframboise, directed hostility and venom at Pilk for deviating from the established consensus. She outlined details of harassment campaign against Pilk, characterizing campaigners in the worst terms. I have little doubt that Laframboise's views are sincerely held. I also tend to accept that claims about the harassment campaign, which apparently included attempts at character assassination, however, these attacks are more than mirrored by those on climate scientists. To cite a couple of examples, Kerry Emanuel, an MIT climate scientist, received regular email threats that threatened him and his family. Or him or her, I don't know, Kerry. The same article reports that Texas Tech University professor Catherine Hayhoe received plenty of hostility and venom via social media. I've given her a little venom, but, for other reasons. Finally, the researchers involved in the ClimateGate leaks in 2009 were the targets of robbery and organized ongoing attack. Focusing on attacks on climate heretics and ignoring those on mainstream climate scientists is a clear double standard. It's also fairly clear that such one-sided exposés have ulterior motives. Similar strategies were used in the 1960s by the tobacco industry when the data about lung cancer emerged. Oreskes and Conway have documented that the tobacco industry also used heretics to promote its interests.
Unknown caller.
And you shall remain unknown. Where am I? Since the 1990s, fossil fuel interests have picked up these strategies and run with them. This is why contrarian voices in the climate debates can rarely be taken at face value. That's absolutely true. All right, so I'm going to take a break here. We're almost done with this article. Or are we? Yeah, we're almost done. I'll take this call from Brady. How you doing?
Sorry, stuffing my face full of food right now.
I caught you off guard.
I can still talk. So what are you reporting on today exactly? What is the sticky situation?
You got it. You have to turn off your whatever you're listening to. Anyways, Brady, I'm gonna actually let you go. I'm sorry. Thanks for calling in. I appreciate it. I'm gonna continue reading this. Yeah, I don't know. Feel free to call in another day, though. I appreciate it. All right. I don't know what the point of that was. Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. Oreskes and Conway say some sides represent deliberate disinformation spread by well-organized and well-funded vested interests, or ideologically driven denial of the facts. Even honest people with good intentions may be confused or mistaken about an issue. So things are not what they seem. The Global Warming Policy Foundation is a think tank or lobby group based at the notorious 55 Tufton Street in Westminster. 55 Tufton Street is the home to a number of right-wing think tanks that are funded with dark money. And they have a very destructive influence. Advice from 55 Tufton Street is very likely what led Liz Truss to crash the UK economy in September 2022. One of the other functions of these lobby groups is to act as agent provocateurs in the so-called culture wars. They form part of a network that propagates mis- and disinformation with the aim of promoting liberal, extreme free market values, right? Conservative liberal or neoliberal, whatever you want to call it. A report by ISD Global notes that this network is used to promote inertia in inactivism, using arguments framed as pro-green and applying the veneer of fiscal pragmatism, free market logic, or concerns about individual liberty to their positions. The result is that environmentalism has gradually become enmeshed in broader identity and grievance politics and emerged as a vital new front in the culture wars. True. The heretic framing, as well as a certain kind of free speech advocacy, is often used in the culture wars. It's an integral part of grievance politics. The tactic is to use real or imagined controversies to push an agenda that is to the advantage of those funding the think tanks and the lobby groups. Well, true, although I'm a free speech absolutist, and the best way to counter wrong ideas is with the right ideas, right? Or wrong information with right information, or good information, whatever you want to call it. The heretic framing, as well as certain kind of free speech advocacy, is I've read that. The primary targets of this tactic are not the participants in the debates, but onlookers, members of the public, policymakers, etc., who could potentially be swayed by claims of unfair treatment and the advocacy of free speech. Many of us like to think that we are open-minded enough to hear dissenters out. Many of us also dislike the unfair treatment of others. The truly dishonest part of these strategies are that they use this sense of fairness for political leverage. 90 seconds to midnight. There's one further reason why heretical narratives about climate breakdown, rejecting extreme scenarios, are attractive. This is because contemplating possible catastrophic outcomes, which include social and ecological collapse, can be very distressing. Right. People don't really want to engage with this information or this news because it's distressing. I think that many of us have moments when we wish that climate breakdown would just go away. So I don't blame even professionals who by now should know better being attracted to what amounts to intellectual bromides. Wishful thinking about climate breakdown has become very dangerous. Guys, we're going to make it. If everybody just switches to efficiency stoves and dishwashers and whatnot, we're going to climb out of this climate change hole. We're going to make it. It's one of the things that people are into. The effect is the same: delay and obfuscation at a time when swift, definitive action is needed, like Wales stopping all road projects, or most road projects. Anyways, I could go on. Indeed, we've seen how a small group of men with scientific bona fides and deep political connections deliberately distorted public debate, running effective campaigns to mislead the public and deny well-established scientific knowledge over 4 decades. And we've seen how many skeptical claims are based on ignoring evidence. Those critiquing the right. Yeah, I don't like science when it goes against my narrative. But when it helps me out, I really love science. Those critiquing the exploration of extreme climate scenarios have been ignoring inconvenient evidence. In fact, their arguments often read as if we are in the same situation that we were in 20 or 30 years ago. Oh, your models are all wrong. Prove to me that something is happening. Right. We're way beyond that. And climate breakdown was still a blip on the horizon. They ignore what's happening outside their own windows, right, that you can see with your own eyes. Not only that, but they assume that free markets and technological advancement will automatically resolve the dangerous situation in which we find ourselves. There's a basic refusal to admit that climate breakdown is a consequence of unfettered capitalism and the unbridled use of fossil fuel dependent technology. Boom, bam, bip. For me, it's well past time that the burden of proof was shifted to the doubters. There's an overabundance of evidence that things are getting worse faster. There's also a significant lack of evidence that humanity is responding with anything like the speed that is needed to avoid the worst outcomes. Arguing over the finer points of the damage is now beside the point. On the 24th of January 2023, the board of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists moved the clock forward to 90 seconds to midnight, noting a time of unprecedented danger. Soon after the announcement was made, the clock was significantly criticized, in part because of the 2023 statement's stance on Ukraine. The statement also seemed to me to underplay the risks of climate breakdown, but still, the new time remains a very concerning indicator. At such a time, wishful thinking, obfuscation, denial, self-deception, and delay remain the height of folly. Okay. Thanks, guys, for listening. I'm going to wrap it up here. I just want to read through that. I already read it earlier today, and I've read it again, and it's pretty good. All right. Appreciate y'all hanging out with me on these interwebs every single day. I will be back tomorrow at the regular time of 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Ace Butcher says, been watching this show for 2 weeks, and it has been really top-notch every day. Thank you, Ace Butcher. I appreciate you. Right on. All right. Thanks, all. I will see you tomorrow. Obsolete Optics gave me a last-minute super chat. Thank you. He said, I just want to say that I listened to Cicada yesterday. That's one of my records. After the show, and I really dug it. Boom is really funny and had me giggling to myself at work. Thank you. I did that with a comedian friend, comedian beatboxer, Joshua Silverstein, who was very funny, and he helped me kind of bring out the comedic part of that song. But thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, and if you guys want to check out any of my music, you can do so at kevinsandbloom.com. You will find all my links to listen to all my records and stuff. Yeah. Also, I'm gonna start doing some musical. I don't know what you want to call it, streams. Mostly probably Instagram and maybe on YouTube. I'm not sure, but keep a lookout for that. I'll let you guys know about it when I start doing it. I'm gonna do some regular musical streams because I need to build up my my performance muscle again. But anyways, thanks guys. Thanks for hanging out with me. And hey, William, how you doing? I'll take this call real quick from William. Are you there?
Oh, hey, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
Hang on. I just had to unmute.
I was about to sign off. You caught me in the last second.
I know. I just wanted to say, in the same PR firms that were covered for the cigarette industry, they've been around a long time. They use the same PR firms for the oil and gas industry. Similar.
It's all the same. It's all the same firms.
Yeah.
Right.
You got the deal.
Yep.
Real quick, maybe I don't know if you want to. In Equatorial Guinea, I think it was yesterday, World Health Organization acknowledging a Marburg virus outbreak that's killed, I think, like 9.
Oh wow!
It's a hemorrhagic virus, kind of like Ebola.
Yep.
But there's links in there, and there's also a prediction of it in a link that I put in from 2021. And then Dr. Jane Ruby on what's the real risk of catching this. It's very rare and hard to catch, but it doesn't spread fast and like a fire because it takes its victims out too fast, and then so it stays local.
Is that the same as Ebola too?
It's pretty much. Yeah, that's it. Wait, it's a
Well,
hemorrhagic
it's,
virus.
well, it's already in USA Today, so maybe I'll cover this tomorrow.
Okay, great. Okay,
right.
I'll let you go.
Okay, man. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye.
All right, guys. Thanks so much. I will see you all tomorrow. Until next time, peace.